I'm going to share my story with you. And again, I'm not much for sugarcoating anything. And anyone that's had a brain injury realizes we have no filter after that anyway. So watch out for that one. So anyway, let's start out with the fact of what I do for a living. And so I want you to have some fun today too. The object is not just to, I want to inspire you, have hope. Yeah, there's some very sad parts of my story, but ultimately, if you look at me now, it's a great ending. So before I introduce myself, Letitia Frye, that little guy, the furry guy on the right-hand side, that is Fozzie Bear. Fozzie Bear is my service dog. He is trained and licensed for seizures and PTSD. Now, the seizures, knock on wood, have been years since they happened, and so now he's basically just my PTSD dog, but I also like to say I went through a brain injury and I came out, at least my prize was a dog. So, I also laughed when Carrie said, "How are the lights?" And I said, you know what? I'm going to stick with these lights because there was a time where I would have had a mental breakdown if I saw these lights. So literally lights like this at a time in my life, on my career, were the lights that would trigger a seizure, and they would absolutely put me into another universe. So the fact that I can see them now and I kind of go like that is great. So here's what I do for a living. I'm an auctioneer. So I'm an auctioneer that specializes in nonprofit fundraising. So I do about 100 a year. I travel all over the country. My largest client is St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I have called the Valley my home for 20 years, and I've had this career for 18. So just for fun, everybody has fake money. Here we go. Opening bid, 1,000 bid, you bid 1,000, you bid 1,000, you bid 15, gonna bid now 2, you bid 25, you bid 3,000, you bid 35, you bid 4, you bid 45, 45, you bid 5. Come on, I give you free money. Let's go. 5, you bid 55, you bid 6,000, you bid 65, you bid 7, you bid 75, you bid 8, you bid 5, you bid 9. Sold $10,000 right there in the hat. So that's what I do. And I go up on a stage like this, and I hop out, and Alice Cooper's been my friend and client for about 18 years, and he dubbed me the Auctiontainer, because he's just like, it's like auctioning and entertainment all at once. And so that's awesome, and I'm known for jumping off of stages like a rock star and blah, blah, blah. So that was all fine and great. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is I don't sit at a desk, and I don't do normal everyday 9-to-5 job. Which, in the worlds of brain injury, the one I got, that's the job you want. You don't want this job with the one I got. So here's how it all starts. I'm an avid runner, been running for a long time. Now, I was separated from my children's father, but still very, very good friends, and to the point where Thanksgiving morning, he was going to come over and meet with us to have some bagels and lox and then drive us to the airport so that I could fly with my kids to my fiance's home and have Thanksgiving dinner with him and his family in Newport Beach. So I run all the time. That's about the time of P.F. Chang's marathon's coming up. I was going to do the half marathon, and so I thought, you know what? I've got to get on a plane. I'm just going to go do like a light run around the neighborhood, 3 miles. And I'm a fast runner, like 7.5 minutes. It means my kids, who at the time were 10 and 11, certainly old enough to be, they're totally dressed for Thanksgiving. Dad lives a mile up the street. They're playing video games. Everything's set. So I'm like, I'll be right back. About 23 minutes. So I hop out the door, and I get about a mile up the road, and it's 10:44, 10:45 in the morning. And for anyone that knows North Scottsdale, I am running on Hayden, north on Hayden, which is split into 2 one-ways. Traffic come this way, medium in the middle that way, just north of Thompson Peak before Pinnacle Peak. So I'm running north on Hayden, and I stop. I get past Thompson Peak, I go up there, and there's a little area now. I'm literally right by my ex-husband's street called Los Gatos, and I'm right there, and there's a car coming out and 2 cars coming to me. So I'm doing that stupid thing you see runners do, that we think we're cool and we're not, So we're sitting on there on Thanksgiving morning, and I'm on the crosswalk. And this is an area that comes out from the condos, and the young man whose our lives were about to cross forever, his name is Douglas. And Douglas, unbeknownst to me, was on his way to meet his girlfriend's parents, who he had intended to ask to marry for the first time for Thanksgiving. So a little nervous, a little antsy, and there are 2 cars coming 60 miles an hour towards us. Douglas is, when you got the car this way and you're looking that way, but you're not really looking that way. And there I am doing this, hanging out and texting my fiance to remember to get flowers for his mother and blah, blah, blah. And everybody's fine. I remember a woman walking her dog across the street. It was a beautiful day, November day here in Arizona. I grew up in the East Coast, okay? So I've been out here for 20 years, and at this time, this was 7 years ago. So I see the 2 cars coming 60 miles an hour, and I think, there's no way, right? He's not about to do this. And as a runner, when you run, I run 50 to 60 miles a week, you always keep that in the back of your head. Sure, you can get hit. Bicyclist, runner, whatever. So I stepped into the crosswalk as Douglas went like this and went, oh, I'm late. boom. And he gunned it. So he took me into the 2 cars that were coming 50 miles an hour towards us. I hit those cars. I bounced back from those cars, landed upside down. I do recall being upside down, looking at him with his eyes wide open and me like a cartoon, and I went into his windshield and into his head of his car, and then I continued to fly, and then I landed on my head on the sidewalk, and I split my head completely open. This is all piecemeal for me. I don't remember a lot. I do remember, and it's why I can't watch those war movies with that high-pitched sound after a gun or anything goes off, because that's what was going on in my head. And everything was very foggy, and I remember like just this pain in my head that was unbelievable, and that sound was driving me nuts. And I looked around, and my shoes were like a block over there, and I heard that woman screaming with her dog, and I saw my hat over there, and my phone over there, just everywhere. And I saw him getting out of his car. It seemed like slow motion, and he came over towards me, and I was like, I am so sorry, because I felt like I trashed his car. I felt like a deer, that had just been hit. And so I was like, I am so sorry, I'm so sorry. And he was looking at me like, don't be. And I just kept saying, my head hurts, my head hurts, my head hurts. Anyway, I went like this. And I wasn't prepared for Jell-O and all the rest of it. And so when I went like this and saw it, I passed out. So I passed out. And for me, I had a near-death out-of-body experience that was phenomenal as far as I'm concerned, because I woke up 4 years old in my Aunt Justine's farm in Pennsylvania in the middle of a field. And for me, I saw the most beautiful light and love everywhere. So I was having this wonderful experience while, unbeknownst to me, the rest of the world was having a meltdown all around me. So several firemen, fire trucks, ambulances. It's Thanksgiving morning. People are out walking. And Douglas could have left, and if he did leave, I would have died. So he stayed with me, and I really don't know how long I was unconscious, but I do remember as I was in my wonderful world, in this white light and everything, I wanted to stay, and they were like, no. And I remember coming up, pushing back towards almost like a birthing canal back into the earth, and I really didn't want to. And then you kind of land back in, and you come to. And for me, it was like, I'm dating myself, I'm 52, because if you know Charlie Brown, you're definitely my age or older, because all I heard was wah, 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 wah. So if you know anything about the rules, now in my line of work as this charity auctioneer, part of why I'm called the Auctiontainer is I decided, I'm a theater major from USC, sorry any ASU fans, but I decided to research all of my roles by going to volunteer for my clients and spending time with them. I was a camp counselor at a camp for children with cancer, and so I made this a part of my job so that I could be better on stage, really expressing what these nonprofits are about. And one of those nonprofits I did was John C. Lincoln Hospital. And one of the days I volunteered, we got to hang out in a level 1 trauma. And I was fundraising why they wanted to create a level 1 trauma, because I didn't understand why all the equipment has to swing to you and why this room is so expensive. So I remember being with Marcia Mintz at the time, was the CEO of the hospital, and I remember the way that we kind of did this auction is we put a stopwatch up behind us for the amount of time you have before it's too late in a brain injury, before it's too late to know what the damage is. So I remember all this. Now you cut to several years later, I'm on the side of the road, and I also remember there's a set of questions that the EMT and the firemen have to ask you, like, do you know your name, the year? They usually like to ask the president. I have no idea what that's about. They ask like a series of questions, and I remember. So I come to, and I remember hearing this like this, and that was a fireman's boot. But when you're laying on the sidewalk, now unbeknownst to me, Douglas had picked me up out of the street, brought me back to the sidewalk, and when I came to with the wah, 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 that was the fireman trying to ask me, do you know where you are, who you are, or anything? The pain in my head, I don't remember anything. I literally remembered absolutely nothing. Now, remember, I grew up in Connecticut, and I'd just been in my mind in a field in Pennsylvania in the middle of the summer in my shorts. So they said, what time of year is it? I go, it's summer. And they were like, what about the season? I'm thinking, what is wrong with you people? Because they're trying to clue me in. It's Thanksgiving Day. Like, think about this. But again, East Coast shorts to me meant summer, and that's where I just was. So, nope. And then, of course, when I was for Eisenhower, that seemed totally reasonable, too. So, anyway, I failed everything, and I remember wrap her up. So off we went into a completely bizarre scene in the back of this. Now, I do remember this officer. In my line of work, I don't use notes, okay? Now, I was born with a photographic memory, But in order to cue that memory in a stage setting, let's say I had to remember, I always remember this, I have ring assistants out there that catch the bids like you were all just bidding, and they go, yes, yes. If you ever watch Barrett Jackson, that's them. If I have to remember something like someone's name, like one time Jane Spicer, and I couldn't remember it, I'll have them give me a clue like hot, spicy, like that. And I'm like, Jane Spicer. So my mind was already programmed to do that. And the officer walked up and I saw Brown, Officer Brown. And my mind went, color. And I'm like, that's a color. And instantly as my mind started to do this, these very things that I put into my job were starting to save my life. I didn't know that. I didn't plan that. So I started to do it and I went Brown, color. Oh, I have kids and they're home alone, but they're old enough to be. And so we started doing that. And I was able to find my phone and say, kid's dad is in there. And so we started this whole thing. And so I ended up in the ambulance and I'm on Hayden, just north of Thompson Peak. Well, the closest level 1 is Osborne in Old Town. So for me, I'm in the back of this ambulance. And remember, I've been out running. I've been listening to Barry White. So the Barry White comes back on the phone. It's playing in the back. I mean, this was like the most bizarre scene in the world. And you have to find humor in it. But then I realized, you know what? We must have passed several hospitals by now. I am screwed. So this is a part that, truthfully, not sure what's real and what's not. That day is kind of foggy, but I pulled up. I do remember that the 2 gentlemen trying to put the needles in my arm were African American. I do remember that the driver was kind of a shorter guy. And so when we pulled up to the back, a ridiculously tall Caucasian man got in and said, I need you to listen to me. When these doors open, there are a bunch of people that are waiting for you here. And I need you to promise me one thing. Do not pass out. Number 2, I'm going to tell you 3 things, and I want you to repeat them. Brian, green ball, 15. Now, I told you what my little trick is in my head. So when I was 15, I went to Greens Farms Academy, and my boyfriend's name was Brian. So I instantly played that game, Brian, green ball, 15. He goes, I'm going to come find you later today, and I need you to tell me, Brian, green ball, 15. And remember, whatever you do, don't pass out. Okay? Those things open, and if anyone's been to level 1 trauma, oh, wow, it's game on. So we went in, and I mean, every single thing that could swing this thing, and I'm just trying not to pass out. And I remember hearing the zzz, didn't realize they were shaving my head. And then because of the nature of where the back of the cerebellum, where my brain injury was, they couldn't anesthetize me. So they gave me a towel to bite while they stapled my head shut. And my goal was to not pass out. And I did all that. And I was trying to remember everyone's name. That was another thing I was trying. If your name was Cindy and you were giving me the MRI, I was just trying to, like, if I could just remember her name and say thank you, if I could just, so I was just trying to just give something to my brain. So I ended up in the ER, and then my ex-husband had come and brought my kids. My son took one look at me and passed out on the floor. You know, when you have this happening to you, your adrenaline's off the charts. I thought I was fine. I mean, they cut my clothes off me. I was covered in all kinds of stuff, but I didn't know. I mean, I was like trying to post it on Facebook. I was out of my mind, plus the morphine and everything else. It was crazy. So after all that, they left to go, you know, my kids needed to step aside, and then the nurses all disappeared. No clue about time. I've lost all sort of time. And eventually, sometime later in that day, that man came back, that enormous, like 7-foot tall EMT. And he came back in the room, of course, when nobody was there. And he said, what are the 3 things I told you? And I said, Brian, green ball, 15. And he gave me a kiss on my forehead and said, you're going to be fine. So no one has any recollection, and there's no record of that man. He's actually most likely a figment of my imagination, because I tried to find that man. I looked up. I did find Officer Brown. There isn't an EMT that matches that description, so I don't know. But all I know is that in the midst of all that, I had the wherewithal to understand that there were a set of tools that somehow I had put together that were inadvertently going to save my life. Now, most people would have stayed in the hospital and did everything they wanted to do because it was Thanksgiving, but not me, and not with a brain injury, because all that, I'm like, no, I can answer your questions, I can go home. So after like 15 hours and whatnot, I decided I was going home, which, huge mistake, huge. And so if anyone's here as a loved one of a brain injury person, we think we're making great decisions, and we're totally know what's going on. So, and don't pick a fight, trust me. But it might be nice to occasionally be like, maybe you might want to reconsider this. So I left and went home. And of course, what they give all brain injuries, here's excuse my French, shit ton of pain pills and some Klonopin. Good luck. So I left with all that and didn't really know what was going on. And, it was kind of a disaster. And my fiance flew out. Anyone that walked in the room instantly passed out or looked like they were going to throw up. So I figured no one would let me anywhere near a mirror. No, not allowed. And I wasn't allowed to shower for 3 days. But you cut to me knowing everything, and I did the one thing that no one should ever do. I waited 8 days and got back on a stage. I had my head shaved. I called my hairdresser, had her a comb over of my hair, and I went and did an event that I have no recollection of being there. None. To this day. Barely remember it. And 3 days later, I got on a stage at Alice Cooper's concert in Comerica Theater, and I seen pictures. I barely remember that either. I do remember seeing the executive director take one look at me and go, whoa, like that. I was flying on pain pills, completely not paying attention to what I was doing, with absolute disregard for myself. Now, on a personal note, prior to this accident, I'll be honest with you, I had been separated. My ex and I were best friends from college. He had an addiction he could not beat. So I left with my kids. I left with the shirt on my back, despite he was a Wolf of Wall Street kind of guy, $1 million lifestyle. 2008, I made $21,067 with 5 jobs and my 2 kids. So I had built this company from the ground up, and I was hell-bent if I was going to lose it. So I had built it from the ground up, but at the time in my life when I was building it, I had no regard, no balance. I had no regard for my life. I was just climbing that mountain with just like, get out of my way. Here I come, type A, pain in the ass, on her way. And then add in a brain injury. It's fun. But so here's what happens. I think I know everything. And I go out. So the Super Bowl is coming into town, into Phoenix. And I'm St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is my largest client. I've been doing an event at the Super Bowl now for 12 years. 7 years ago, we're honoring Joe Buck. Know him very well. Up on stage, have kind of a strange feeling going on, and I have a seizure on stage, mostly from things like this. I had noticed in those days leading up to it, it was January, I want to say 27th or 29th, when I would go outside, I had unbelievable headaches. I pulled myself off of all social media I couldn't even think about, because again, with my career, everyone that thought they were my competitor was telling everyone I was permanently out of it. Again, I fought tooth and nail for my career, man. Tooth and nail. Very few women in my career, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. So the battle begins. When I left that hospital, that was biting on that and having my head stapled shut was the easy part. What ensued over the next 7 months was a virtual nightmare, and a lot of it was my own fault. So I have that seizure, and now that happened to have been sponsored by Barrows, that event. So is there a doctor in the house? Yeah, there were a few. So I caught myself as I came down off. My tongue went down. My eyes went back. I glued myself into someone and managed to somehow pull that off, and then got taken by the whole board of Barrows was there into Barrows that night, and I was diagnosed as having had a stroke. I was, 41, 42 years old? I was like, wait, what do you mean I had a stroke? So mind-blowing, okay, for lack of a better term. But it's was just a lot to swallow. Remember, single mom, trying to go through this stuff, trying to save my career, trying to get back to my life. What do you mean I can't have my life back? What has happened here? So turns out it wasn't a stroke. It was misdiagnosed as a stroke. It was some blood that was left from the accident that had kind of traveled up through and had triggered this, but the lights. So I finally got a chance now, no offense to neurologists, God bless them, but they're not easy. So part of my problem with neurologists is I show up looking like this. I don't look sick. And I'm trained to do that. And I'm not going to lose my career, so I'm going to walk in, no matter how hard it is at home, looking like this. So he's going to take one look at me and be like, she's fine. But I wasn't fine. I wasn't even close to fine. So after I had that seizure, what started to happen is if we were in an audience like this, all of you would flip upside down. I got vertigo to the point where you'd be like the Titanic up there. I'd be down here. I also suddenly turned into Timothy Leary and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas because everything was melting like I had somehow been dosed. I mean, carpets were melting together and people's faces were weird. I mean, I was out there. And if you woke up in the morning, you had that day, the day where the clouds are not quite clouds, but it's kind of white, gray light out there. Oh, I was like, I don't even know why I'm leaving the house. Because I always remember I'd get on the 51 or the 101, I have to pull over. I had no idea where I am. No clue. Now remember, I got an ex-husband that's got an addiction problem, and is going through a lot. I'm worried someone's going to take my kids because I'm trying to get them to school. I shouldn't, what am I doing? And I'll always remember this. Now, I work with a lot of veterans, and I never understood veterans that had these brain injuries and this PTSD, why they always had an issue with Walmart. Everyone has an issue with Walmart. And I was like, why is that always in the video? Well, after my brain injury, let's start there. First of all, I suddenly could hear every infrared light or every one of those lights that they use in those stores. They buzz. I never heard them before. It turned into like a dog. I could suddenly hear everything that was happening up there, and it was deafening. Now remember, I was hit on Thanksgiving. It's Christmas time. So my son used to have an eye exam. I got to go into Walmart. Now again, I look just like this. I got my purse. I got my nice shoes on. I walk in. They go, would you like to sit down with your son? He's like 10, 11 years old. Sure. I'm holding on to the chair because the wall's melting and the equipment is turning into spiders that are looking at me. And I'm just going, oh, okay, everything's cool. And I realize when you go into Walmart, when you walk in, you smell those cookies. And then you see that all the produce is put up. It's meant to stimulate all your senses. It's meant to have you smell and hear and sound all at once. But when you have a brain injury, that means crash. We're going down. So Walmart became a major problem for me. And I suddenly had empathy for these veterans and God, I get it, man. Walmart sucks. I was just like, but the funniest thing, when you have a brain injury, you make small goals. I go to Walmart now and go, just like these lights. It became a goal of mine. I'm stand outside of Walmart and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I got this. I'm gonna go in. And I maybe just past the greeter. I'm like, nope, I'm out. And then I'm like, nope, we're gonna go back to Walmart. And small goals became my life. Small goals. Stop trying to conquer everything, do everything. But again, still overworking. So now it's April, right? Now we're at Easter. The vertigo is so bad on the stages that I've learned to wear longer dresses. I've learned to bring a table like this so I can do this with my finger. And I learned to wear not like pony heels like this, so I could do this and stable myself while all of you are rocking around, while I continue to hide my illness from everyone, except for my kids at home. For me, in the middle of the night, if you had to go to the restroom or anything, I would walk into every wall. For me to pour juice was like this. I couldn't find the cup. I had that tinnitus in my ear constantly. I had lost the sight in my right eye, and I had developed a stutter. Not ideal for my job. And literally trying to hide this. So vertigo, when my line of work, if you were to come up to me, close talkers, oh man, it's like personal space, please. Carpets in different, can we just get normal carpets like this? So my whole world is crashing down around me, and all I can think of is, my God, man, why? I work so hard. Like, why are we doing this? Why am I going through this? So I went through a lot of depression. Pain pills were not helping my cause, and the Klonopin sure as hell wasn't helping my cause. And at that point, I'm taking that in the morning and at night, and I'm following the directions. And no one's also helping me get to the bottom of why I'm like this. It finally took an audiology appointment where they turned me upside down and basically waterboarded me and created a seizure, and they were able to catch it. And they go, oh, she has a brain injury in the cerebellum. I'm like, thank you. So thus started my therapy. So I went to an ocular therapist because a lot of the damage was affecting my eyes. The reason I was having the seizures, I'm up here tracking all of you doing that. Turns out my eyes were no longer tracking at the same time because they atrophied when I hit the pavement so hard. So it's about 2 seconds off. So my brain's getting information visually 2 seconds apart from one another, and same in my ears. So if I was the person at the desk doing a 9-to-5 job, I had the ideal brain injury. Problem is, I had the brain injury that very few get that's not for the person on a stage that's doing what I do. So at this point now, we are in April. I'm in San Francisco. I'm in front of former Secretary of State George Shultz doing a whole honor there, and I have another seizure. My God, I got hit in November. We're at April now. So I'm fighting through all of this. Now I figured out that if I took Dramamine, do not do this. If I took Dramamine before I got on stage, it could slow the seasickness I was feeling from all of you rocking around. And then if I could slam a Coca-Cola or Pepsi to wake myself back up from the Dramamine, I could somehow get on stage. That's how desperate I was. Not smart. And again, this whole thing ensued. So finally, a very caring doctor introduced me to alternative brain mapping. I went and had my brain mapping done. And the way that I was described with my injury is how I see families with children with cancer. If we have two twins, they're raised exactly the same, they're the same kind of personality, and one gets sick with cancer, you turn all your attention to that child. This seemingly well-behaved child suddenly is TPing the neighbor's thing and failing out of school because you're not paying attention to it. Well, essentially in my mind, the brain moved so far over here to help everything that needed to help over there, it left the part that does depression, all these other things unattended. So things were out of control on that side. So I went through Ocular Therapy. Dr. Neha Amin was mine. She works predominantly with athletes. Again, for me, the concussion and the brain injury I had is mostly like hockey players. Shane Doan helped me. Larry Fitzgerald gave me some advice because I work with those guys. Very few women I could talk to. When I found the Brain Injury Alliance and the Women's Support Group was long after mine was done. I wish I had that. This place is amazing. There wasn't anybody. I had veterans, predominantly men, and athletes, predominantly men. It's a different experience as a mom and a woman, and the way you felt that you were failing your children and failing yourself. And so all of this happens, and honestly, it was a virtual nightmare. But somehow, I had to wear water goggles and learn how to shoot baskets and play these kind of games, and I had to wear prism lenses to push my vision back through. And I went through physical therapy, and I went through brain mapping, and that brain mapping really started to bring things back. And none of this was easy. I was nauseous, I was vertigo, I was all of this. But at least I thought, okay, I got to slow down. So one of the things is we're now at July, okay, and I'm doing an event in Memphis for St. Jude. Big concert, and there is the CEO of St. Jude is Rick Shadyac. His brother is Tom Shadyac. He's the one that did Ace Ventura and all the rest. He's a big Hollywood producer, and he produced, and I highly recommend this. There's a documentary called I Am, and he had a brain injury. He was on a mountain bike, and he was a big Hollywood guy, and he went out in search of the world of what were the answers from his brain injury. He's a great guy and came out very well from his brain injury, and he had known about what happened to me from the hospital, and he was in the audience, and he looked at me as I was upstage. He said, I need to talk to you. And I said, sure. He said, look, I've been thinking about how I address everything that you're going through, and it's very obvious you're struggling through a lot, and you're fighting through it. But if you were to ask yourself in one word, what did God take from you in this injury? What did he take? And I said, well, the easiest thing is balance. And he said, well, did you have any in your life before the injury? And I said, no, I had nothing. He goes, then work on that. So I started to switch my thinking. Instead of me trying to control the world to make it the way I needed to be and desperately fight for my old life back, I started to do what a lot of veterans call the new normal. I started to ask myself, what if it never comes back? What if it never comes back? What am I going to do? And so I started to switch. I started to prepare for those days with the lights. I started to understand and be kinder and gentler and more patient with myself. And I truly started to understand that maybe I'm not going to be who I was anymore. And look, I'd never dropped an F-bomb at my kids. I almost gave away my rescue dogs. I mean, I was literally... This is another thing about the brain injury and about not having a women's support group. The men I talked to, the thing that freaked them out was the crying. We cry all the time. So men, when they got to the crying phase, they were like, what's happening to me? Me, it was the anger phase. When I wanted to go across to my bank teller and rip her larynx out and mean it, I was like, what is wrong with me? I'd never been aggressive. But guys, especially athletes, they're like, we do that all the time. It's called ice hockey, you know? So for me, there was a lot of things. It was like, what's going on? So I got gentle. I got kind, and I slowed down. And I started to find balance in my life. I started to find balance in everything I was doing in my life and realize that as much as this was a nightmare, and I was the person that was so desperate, and I got so low that absolutely the darkest thoughts entered. And again, that was an untended to area of my brain. I had to get myself off those pain pills. I did. It took a couple more years to get off that Klonopin, AKA, we call him the benzo dog over here, got me off of it. It was really, really hard. And trying to hide it and trying to, keep my career and all the rest of it. So I noticed in my ex-husband, who again, if you saw Wolf of Wall Street, you saw his life. It was losing everything. We were very good friends, but you stay clear of that until someone pulls it together. Unbeknownst to me, he had been arrested for cocaine possession. He was going through his own thing, and he was a very successful businessman, and he had been indicted. I didn't know any of this. I'm fighting my way to get back on my feet. And I remember he said something to me that should have given me a warning. He said, how do you keep getting up? How do you do this? How do you keep getting up? I'm like, you just do. You just do. And I started to learn different things of ways that I could get back up and do it. So I was on my way. He was supposed to come get the kids in the morning. It was in July. And I got on a plane to go to Nantucket, which if anyone's ever done, you fly to Boston and you take these really scary little planes and go over to the island. And as I was sitting there, I finally, like, the vertigo had stopped. I was like, wow, you know what? I think I got this. And then a little voice was like, why do I think that was just the warmer upper? And by the way, I never sued Douglas. If Douglas had left me on the side of the road, he was a young man starting his life. I had much better insurance than he did. I would have destroyed his life. So there is an option. I sued myself because technically as a pedestrian, I still was covered by my auto insurance. So I sued myself, which was a completely humiliating experience because they put you through the ringer even though you've paid for your insurance always. But I'm sure I'm not the only one that figured that one out. But I'm on this plane and I left that morning. A friend had been there making breakfast with the kids, and Stephen was supposed to show up. And so I don't hear from anybody. I land in Nantucket. It's now 5 o'clock here. It's now 8 o'clock there. And my son calls and says, Mommy, Daddy never came. And I said, what do you mean Daddy never came? I said, he goes, well, we didn't, we know the rules. They're 11 and 13 now. He said, we made top ramen and we didn't do anything. And I said, well, that's weird. He said, I can't get a hold of him. So without going too much into it, because it was a long story to find it, he shot himself and he took his life. So what I learned was now that's how I would go to get to these trips and take care of my kids. I had just come through this brain injury. I had absolutely no money because of everything that was happening and trying to get my life back together. And P.S. Ocular Therapy is not paid by insurance or anything else. I was just fighting for my life. And now I was up against this. Single parent, and when he passed, he did not leave. Turned out he was being indicted, did not have a bank account, no health insurance, no life insurance, and had $26 in his wallet. His car was being repossessed, his house was being repossessed, nothing, not a dime, 26. My son said, you can't say he didn't leave you $20, 26. So what I learned about brain injuries is that a blunt force trauma to the head is one thing, but physical trauma will also set you back. And you have to understand to go back to those same rules. So the tinnitus came back, the vertigo came back, and I thought, you got to be kidding me, man. You've got to be kidding me. So I went back to what I know. I went back to the ocular therapy. I went back to the brain mapping, and I thought, you know what? I've climbed this mountain. I'm going to climb it again. Only this time I'm going to climb it smarter. I'm going to ease up on my work. I'm going to ask some other colleagues to take some of that back, and I'm going to figure out how to do this. Now, one of the things I want to tell you is that, remember how I told you I researched all my clients by volunteering with them, right? So in the midst of all this time, in my severest depression, I felt, for lack of a better word, like total crap. I mean, I felt badly about myself. I felt like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get my life back? Why can't I do anything? I was so hard on myself. But remember, my job, and I'm trying to hide this from everyone, was to show up and go sit with someone at Sojourner Center through domestic violence, go to PCH and hang with a kid that has cancer, go to ALS and hang with them. And so as I went to do that, at the end of our little session, they would say, thank you so much. You did so much for me. And I went, oh my gosh, I can actually feel something again. Maybe I'm not worthless. Maybe I'm not as horrible as my mind keeps telling me I am. And so I started to learn that giving time, knowledge, whatever that is, was going to be another one of my tools in my toolbox. That when I gave and showed up and spent time and helped another, it started to help me up here. So I started to realize too that over the years, I work with an LGBTQ group with young kids, and one of the things we teach them are SOS. And people think that is for an old ship thing and it's save our ship. It means save our souls. And so we teach these kids that are dealing with a lot of mental health and suicide and different things like that, how to identify what your SOS is, So what are my sources of strength? My kids, my dogs, cooking, couple of favorite stations on Pandora, things that you could put on. Like I got a couple songs that don't put them on because we're going to start crying. I just fall to pieces. I've also got other songs that if I put them on, boom, the day just got better. And so you have to learn these tools that are starting to help you. What are your SOSs? What is actually going to help me get back into that zone that I know unequivocally without thought works? So for me, I don't say go get a brain injury and then start volunteering. No, that's not going to happen. But if you are already kind of placing in your life, and again, giving isn't necessarily, it's not money. There's so many ways to give. It's volunteering, it's listening. And the pandemic taught us all this, The pandemic taught you if your neighbor was elderly, maybe you got their groceries for them. Maybe somebody didn't mow their lawn and you did it. Maybe you walked their dog. But these little things within you start to help. I call it like the Grinch when his heart starts beating again. That's how I feel. My mind started actually snapping and the synapses came back and went, wow, maybe in here it's not so bad. Because that's where the turmoil was. I looked fine out there. The battle was in here. But I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. So now I was up against that. But God's got a sense of humor. 2 days after the funeral, I go out. And now I had to get up and give a eulogy in front of my kids, all the rest of it. Again, vertigo, blah, blah, blah. 2 days later, I go to my mailbox and open, and there's a check for $120,000 from my exit. And I thought, holy shit. I got a nanny. I got on my feet. I saved my company, myself, and my kids. This talk today is called Curse Blessing because it's Friday the 13th. But also, I started to find that there were a lot of things that happened to me that in the long run were going to be how I experienced them in here. There were certain parts of me that weren't going to be the same. And I had to understand that. I had to understand about pushing myself too hard, balances, my SOSs, all of that. Now, once again, God will test you on this. So some meaning well friends, a year and a half later, I'm great. You know, my fiance and I didn't make it. Just so you know, he too had lost a loved one to suicide in his family, and it was just more than any of us could take. So I'm back out there, and I have some well-meaning friends that introduced me to a man that lives in Northern California. I fall in love. He has an LGBTQ child and 2 children. We blend our families, we get engaged, and I'm thinking, that's it. You know, but you know what's funny in that time? I started to lose the balance. I got cocky. You know, I started to think, I'm good. Brain injury's over, blah, blah, blah. And then his son took his life. And we started all over again. And that same tragedy brought it all back, and there was the mirror in front of my face again. Are you going to listen to yourself? Are you going to slow down? Are you going to accept that the old ways are no longer yours? The old ways have died. So I also started to understand through that brain mapping that when I'm here calling out a number, 137, you put a 4, 5 days, and I'm bringing numbers, I suddenly, look, I can't do math. But somehow after the brain injury, I could split my head into 2 functions. And now I'm known for this all over the room. I can beat a computer with how many people gave and how much you raise faster than a computer. I couldn't do that before. So I call it my superpower. I also consider the fact that I hear these annoying lights my superpower. I also consider the fact that I have no filter and I'm going to tell you to F off right in your face, my superpower. It's probably why I haven't dated in 3 years. So, but, which was something else I noticed. You know, searching for the answer in another person by going out and trying to date without handling the battle that was within wasn't for me either. So the past 3 years were dedicated to me. The past 3 years for me to understand, I took up meditation. That became an extraordinary savior for me. Learning to quiet up here, I found myself a set of mantra things I can say that go into neutral. I learned to meditate eyes open. Meditation was a game changer. And I do mean game changer. And I am the most type A squirrel all over the place. The idea of sitting still for 5, and look at me, I can't even get at a podium. So I started with like 4 minutes a day. So now 4 or 5 days a week, I do 30 to 45 at night and maybe 15 to 20 in the morning. For me, it has to do with quiet meditative music in my ear. I also don't sit there like that. My back would be killing me. I'm kind of reclined on my bed because one of the things that happened in my search for anything, I would have done anything if you're like Letitia, full moon, first droplet from a hawk on one leg, lotus leaf, this would have been me. I just wanted my life back. So I found all kinds of people. I went to an energy healer. I went to a tea leaf reader. I mean, I was just like, anybody, please. Until I finally figured out, someone introduced me to a Hindu goddess called Shivati. And what that means is never not broken. And she is in Philadelphia in this beautiful statue where the light goes straight through her. Because in the Hindu religion, the fact that she can be broken apart over and over is her greatest power. Because every time she's broken apart, she chooses what pieces she picks up. So through the brain injury to the 2 deaths, I started to choose the pieces. I didn't want to have wine 7 nights a week anymore. I didn't want to run at the pace I did. There were some friends that had to go too. You know, I wanted to put myself around people that were also going to help push me in a loving manner and understand me. So I started to pick up the pieces of my life and accept that the old me was over, and maybe she wasn't so hot to begin with. So maybe, just maybe, everything I was going through and everything that I was given was a blessing. So I wrote it down. Got a major publishing deal. I wrote it down and have a book on Amazon called No Reserve, because I'm an auctioneer. I used auction terms. I have a second one that's coming out called, it's not out yet, but it's called Fair Market Value on This Journey to the Self. I wrote down all these tools. I briefly go through a lot of what I went through, but I wrote down, how do you, if I could do this and we could do this with brain injuries, get back on our feet, what about the average Joe? You know, what about someone that's out there? You guys are superheroes. That's the way I see it. And the reason why when you watch superhero comic movies, they all live in a mansion together is because nobody understands them. They understand each other. That's why. And that's why you're here today. You know, I finally stopped trying to fit myself back in that Q box that I once belonged in. I don't want to go back to the box. I like doing this in Walmart. I like understanding what is going on in Walmart. I'm not asleep anymore. I can tell when you're marketing me from a million things. I'm observant now. I'm observant of the weather and where I am on a road. Instead of just tuning out and listening to music, I pay attention. These were gifts that I was given. A book, I've always wanted to publish a book. And it was a major publishing deal. That came from this. Now, there again in that acceptance and understanding, I like myself today. I can't tell you that that was ever a case in my life. I grew up very, very tormented inside. And truth be told, the war was always inside of me long before that brain injury. But a lot of people go through life and they try to, and this is what I tell young kids that I mentor. When you were younger, remember how you knew your passions, you knew your truths, and people, you know, especially if you were athletes, everyone expected something from you, but they never gave you a chance to share your thoughts or talk. You're like 16, 17. That's why all the great rock and roll songs talk about being 16 and 17. You're closer to who you really are. And then you're going to go to sleep, and you're going to spend the next 30, 40 years and wake up in middle age, and you've done A plus B equals C, and you're not happy. And you're going to go back to try to figure out, what did I know back there? The brain injury is a fast track back there. That's what I consider it. The brain injury woke me up out of my all too typical life, whether I liked it or not. And then when I finally stopped fighting to get that life back, I recognized, go back to the kid you once were, find the music, find the things, find the activities, and my God, be more truthful to yourself and put the war inside to bed. It's over, man. Meditate, drink less, eat well, hydrate, surround yourself with people who get it. Other superheroes. Screw the vanilla. Sorry. You know, and when I look like this and I show up with that service dog, everyone's like, well, what's, ma'am? I'm like, really? Because I'm not physically showing what it is. And I say, go ahead. Test me on the laws of what you can ask me. You know, P.S. he doesn't bite, but sometimes I wish he did. So, you know, my goal here today was to help you understand it's not easy, and it is hard, and it is sad, but it doesn't have to stay that way always. It doesn't have to stay that way always. I know that I'm one ding away from, I get it. That's why I don't ski anymore. It's why I don't skateboard anymore. I get it, but I'm still living my life. I'm still living my life. I'm still having a good time, but I spent the last 3 years really coming to self-awareness and coming in, and I will absolutely credit the fact that that severe knock to the head woke me up in a manner that took away my ability to stay asleep in my life. And I'm very, very grateful for it. So I hope you got something out of this. It's Friday the 13th, Lucky Friday. Because as much as there are curses, inside each and every one of you is a tremendous blessing. So I hope you got something out of this, and God bless my superhero community.